Crashing the hotel Wi-Fi, my new job, Lang Chain for Jay turns 1 year old, and the usual collection of silly tweets, toots, and skeets. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome, my name is Ken Cousin. This is my free weekly newsletter, Tales from the Jar Side, video version. The title this week I basically just gave you, so the subtitle says, "What kind of car does a baby sheep drive?" A Lamborghini. Just kidding, sheep don't drive, or can't drive, they take a Uber. Oh, that's so bad. Yeah, I couldn't resist. That was really awful. I hope you enjoyed it. Welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of April 28th through May 5th, 2024. This week I taught my Reactive Spring course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, and I gave several talks at the No Fluff Just Stuff event in Wakefield, Massachusetts. Something of a suburb of Boston, although it's a bit of a hike. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the regular average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the button on the newsletter or, of course, on the YouTube channel. Let's start off with a little commentary about the No Fluff Just Stuff event in Boston, or, as I somewhat humorously subtitle it, the Perils of Hotel Wi-Fi. On Friday, I was scheduled to give my talks about accessing AI models from Java. The first talk is just a standard lecture, presentation with slides and everything about how to do that. And it went fine. But in the afternoon, I was scheduled to give sort of the same thing and in back-to-back lectures, which really meant the idea was to do more of a workshop, give everybody a chance to do some coding and see how that works out. So I put together a series of small exercises in Markdown format and made them available in a GitHub repository. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is the GitHub repository at OpenAI demo inside my own account under my last name, Kouscen. These are my AI examples that do not use the Spring Framework. I have a separate one for ones that are based on the Spring Framework. This little file here that I added called labs.md for Markdown, you see if you render a Markdown file, or if you just open a Markdown file in the browser, it renders it all automatically for you. And I've got the exercises and the steps to run. I suppose I should have used numbered lists instead of unnumbered lists. Easy enough to fix. And then I've got code to paste in there and all kinds of stuff. Well, if you could see the very beginning, the idea was to download and install Llama. And then after installing Llama, then to install one of the models that comes from it. And that's where I ran into problems. So I mentioned all of that in here. And what I hadn't counted on, that when everybody in the room started downloading Ollama, not even the models, but just Ollama itself, it basically brought the hotel Wi-Fi to its knees, pretty much crashed it. It wasn't able to do anything, and everybody got stuck, and even the Zoom recording we were making, so that there'd be a recording of the session, even the Zoom call collapsed. And Zoom's pretty good at operating even over my phone. So oh well. So what I wound up doing is I walked through the exercises manually in front of everybody. I just coded it myself in front of them and let them make comments and heckle or whatever, ask questions. But it wasn't what I was hoping for. And the reason I chose Ollama in the first place is that they have an API document that's really simple. If you look at the API document here, there's something about generating a completion and generating a chat completion. And the difference is that a completion is this incredibly simple thing with just a model and a prompt, or maybe a stream property set to false, for example, if you don't want to do the streaming part. And the response is really trivial as well. And then when you go look at the vision model even further down, or there's that streaming property being false. But if you look at the vision model further down, then you see that they allow you to input images in the form of a base 64 encoded string. So the plan was to do a simple chat to that generate endpoint and then do a vision request as well, where you upload an image and it translates that image. It's able to interpret what's in that image. That's the whole point. And then I was going to use sealed interfaces and records and pattern matching for switch and all these neat Java features that have come in the last few versions just to unify all that together. And what I like about Ollama, of course, is there's no key, there's no registration, there's no tokens that you have to pay for, no credit card, none of that stuff. So that was the plan. Now, the alternative would have been to use, say, OpenAI, where you have to register and you have to put in a credit card and even prepay like $5 or $10. It's not a lot, especially because the amount we were going to do wasn't even going to cost, it was going to cost pennies maybe at the most. So it wouldn't have been a big issue, but I didn't want to make everybody have to do that, and that's why I went with Ollama. Well, when the network wasn't up to the job, I probably should have used the OpenAI approach as a fallback plan, because why not, you know? But it didn't work out, and I mean, it worked well enough for me to demonstrate it, and the labs are still there for people who want to try them out, although be careful, because I haven't validated all of them yet. I've got to go through and check a couple of things. I think there's like a variable I used with the same name twice, a request variable I reused rather than updating it, you know, little stuff like that. But I'm running a corresponding No Fluff Just Stuff virtual workshop. I think this is June 12th, as it turns out, called Practical AI Tools for Java Developers. And we'll use that set of exercises there, and I'll modify the setup to tell people to install Ollama or something. I may add to that as well. Okay, so at any rate, that's what happened. I did finally mention that all of this is part of a book I'm writing. It's called Adding AI to Java. And it's going to be published by Pragmatic Programmers, the so-called Pragmatic Bookshelf here at pragprog.com. So I had it magnify considerably, but you could see there's a Jetpack Compose Essentials. That ought to be interesting. And a bunch of featured releases here, and so on and so on. And the last couple books I've written have come from this publisher. And that's what the new one's going to come from as well. Okay, going back here, let's go into the next part. Well, the part entitled here, I Got a New Job, is going to tie into why I'm wearing this hat, by the way. First, I have to lament the state of the tech industry a little bit and point out that, you know, the ongoing layoffs in the tech industry have been really devastating. I did try to look up the data to find out how many people had actually been laid off overall, because I saw an estimate on social media, and I wasn't sure whether that was right or not. The links I found estimated that roughly 200,000 people in the tech industry alone lost their jobs last year, and we're already up to 50,000 so far in 2024. And the worst part is that there's no real good reason for it. I mean, the economy's fine, especially in the tech industry. You know, I mean, I know there are definitely issues with the economy, but it doesn't have anything to do with big companies not making money. They're making tons of money. So why are they laying off people anyway? It used to be that when there were layoffs by a big tech company, then investors thought that was a bad sign, that they were losing money and needed to do something about it. Now, just the idea of, quote, cutting costs by letting people go makes the stock go up, and now they're all doing that. It's just really appalling, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but I'm not going to get into that now. The part that's bothering me is that unlike the layoffs in 2008 and the Great Recession, or back in 2002 when the e-commerce bubble burst and all of that, this time I seem to know a lot of the people who are getting let go, and it's really sad because they're good people. I mean, it's not like they're getting laid off for poor performance or anything like that. It's just if your entire department is eliminated, what are you going to do? And I'm just really disappointed to see all that. Now, on my end, I've been a solo practitioner, an independent trainer, whatever you want to call it, a one-person company since March of 2005. That's my Cousin IT Incorporated that I use to do training classes either directly in companies or as a subcontractor to training companies, which I used to do a lot of. Now, of course, as a one-person company, I can't get laid off, you know, which is interesting because I am a high-maintenance employee, I have to admit. But I can go out of business. That's the danger with being a one-person company. And in the training business, I rarely know what I'm going to be doing more than, say, 2 months ahead of time. My schedule tends to book up roughly 2 to 3 months. ahead of time. O'Reilly's pretty good about giving me a longer term schedule than that, but they don't give me enough business to be my only client. I have to have a set of clients there. So it's something I've been doing now for not quite 20 years. Next March will be 20 years on that. I've always joked, of course, that if some tech giant wanted to buy my company, and I joked, it would be offer me $1 billion, fine, I'll sell the company and find something else to do. And heck, I'd even be willing to sell out for half that, right? Rimshot. Okay, so far so good. That hasn't happened at all. But that really means that bottom line is I haven't been an employee, an actual traditional employee in many, many years. I mean, I've been on some consulting gigs. I've been a contractor, that sort of thing, but not somebody who has a manager and gets benefits and draws a salary that doesn't change no matter how hard I work or anything like that in almost 20 years. Well, I've been mentioning in the newsletter recently, I've been teaching classes at Trinity College in Hartford. That's trincol.edu. That's this one right here. Liberal arts community meets real world connection. Sure. Okay, why not? It's a small liberal arts school in Hartford, Connecticut. There's Trinity colleges all over the country and even all over the world. But this is the one where I've been going, and I taught a class last semester and I taught one this semester. Well, as it happened, they had an opportunity to hire a professor of practice, as they call it, someone who's not tenure track and who's not going to be building a research program, but brings so-called industry experience to bear. Now, I guess I have industry experience. I mean, certainly more than if I'd spent my whole career in academia, but not compared to people who code, every day for a job. I mean, I interact with people like that all the time, but it just feels funny. It's funny how it's a relative term, Anyway, long story short, they offered me a job and I wound up taking it. And what this will be is that starting July 1st, I will have two titles. I'll be visiting professor of the practice in computer science, so I'll be in the computer science department, and also associate director for STEM initiatives in the Entrepreneurship Center. Now, the visiting part of visiting professor means that it's still technically a temporary appointment. It's a 2-year appointment because they could put that through without having to have a nationwide search. Then they'll have that search for the permanent position probably next year sometime, and they've already told me to apply for it. But we'll see. I mean, now I have 2 years to decide, to see how I like it and whether I want to do that or not. The professor of practice idea, I don't know what that word "the" means in there, again, is that I'm more going to be involved in helping students with projects that have some relevance to the community rather than trying to build a research program full of grants and funding sources like that. It's not really my job. My job will be much more to bring practical issues to the academic world. The associate director part for the STEM initiatives in the Entrepreneurship Center, well, STEM traditionally is science, technology, engineering, and math, as you're probably aware. And Trinity has this thing called the Entrepreneurship Center. If I go to the link here, you see it there. It's a distinctive center for entrepreneurship, advances directly or indirectly our mission of preparing bold, independent thinkers who lead transformative lives. That kind of says nothing. I mean, okay, tackling the world's most vexing problems requires people who are both critical thinkers and creative doers. There's no better preparation for this than an education that unapologetically combines the liberal arts with a diverse array of real-world, applied, immersive learning experiences. Again, what does that mean I'm going to do? I have no idea. Well, it's not that bad. I mean, I know that basically the bulk of my job will be working with student projects, helping them come up with ideas, helping them turn them into some form of reality. Let's build a minimum viable product, things like that. See how things go, see what commercial possibilities are available. The director of the Entrepreneurship Center has a lot of contacts with wealthy alumni, and I think he's planning to expand all that to do something relevant, and my job is to help out that effort. I don't know. We'll see. I'm also supposed to make connections with other departments in the university, especially science, technology, engineering, and math related departments and see if we can support their efforts or work together on that. And I like that idea. Heck, I'm happy to work with any of the departments. It's part of the appeal of being at a school like that, is to see how that works. So that's the plan. One thing I do know is now that I've spent almost a year there, certainly an academic year there, I already know I like the kids. Now, it is possible I got a lucky group. Maybe I just got lucky and found a fortunate batch, but I don't know. I get the feeling this is pretty common. They're bright and enthusiastic and interested, and they are, raring to go. And, they're quirky. There's generational things I have to get used to, like they don't read unless you quiz them on things or what have you. But I can adjust to all that, and I like them. They're pretty good. So I kind of enjoy it. Now, part of the quirkiness I mentioned in the newsletter, of course, is that they're 10 years younger than my son, which is weird to me. I think of him as kind of a kid, except he's now in his early 30s. He just turned 32 yesterday, I believe it was. And these kids are, 18 to 22, typical age. And it's like, wow, but they seem pretty grown up to me. A little bit of biographical stuff I threw in there. Like, my goal from a very young age was always to be a professor in an academic organization, but it was going to be a more traditional type. As a kid, I read biographies of Galileo and Newton and Einstein and, mathematicians and physicists, and I dreamed of being that sort of person and revolutionizing physics or math or what have you. And I showed a lot of talent academically, so I could delude myself into thinking I had a chance to do something like that for many years. By the time I hit MIT, I found out, no, that was not going to happen. And of course, there were many hints years before that I would try very hard to ignore. Then I found out not only what academia was like, but what the life of an assistant professor without tenure was like. My advisor at Princeton when I was in graduate school, Oddvar Bendixson, did not get tenure. Now, he stepped into a tenure job at UCLA as soon as he left. So this was not because of him. It was mostly, I think, because of funding issues. Princeton at the time, I assume they're still similar now, but at the time, they really, really cared about money. Everything was money. And if you couldn't bring in huge amounts of money, that was a strike against you as a faculty member. And I found that rather distasteful. I didn't like a lot of what I saw there. And I thought, I'm going to dodge all that. I'm going to go and join an industrial research lab, build up a publication record, build up some funding contacts so that then I could step into something in academia that would be better. Well, I didn't talk about this, but while I was there at United Technologies Research Center in Connecticut, that's how I wound up moving to Connecticut, the academic job market kind of collapsed. It's very hard to get an academic job at all, much less a tenure track one. And I didn't want to fight those battles either. So I kind of got stuck. And I spent nearly 12 years at the research center there. Building up publications, sure, and some funding contacts. But I also got married and started a family. It was not going to be easy for me to move around and find a job wherever it happened to be. So I really didn't enjoy it after a while. Now, I also learned that I didn't really like research. I liked learning, but I didn't like solving really hard problems that I wasn't even sure were solvable. And I couldn't justify giving me funding over giving other people funding, which I thought they were doing tasks that were equally important, if not more, than what I was doing. It's not a good way to sell yourself to a funding agency. So it was not a pleasant experience for me. Now, after 8 years there, I got out of the research game and started working in a group that we called an AI group at the time. It was using neural networks and genetic algorithms and things like that. And I really liked that. And then I wound up going back to school at night to get the master's in computer science to fill in all the computer science background I hadn't gotten when I was a research scientist. I was in aerospace engineering for what it's worth. So all my work was lots of math and lots of Fortran. Yeah, okay. So that shifted right about 2000 when I completed my degree and then left and joined a small consulting group called the Golden Consulting Group, where I started teaching training classes primarily in areas related to Java and at the time XML and things like that. That also gave me my chance to do some teaching without having to do any grading or lesson plans or anything like that. I just had to teach training classes, and I really got into that. I enjoyed that a lot. I was there at Golden for about 5 years before I went out on my own, and I've been out on my own ever since. So, again, I have many other roles. I write books. I've been a speaker on the No Fluff Just Stuff tour. I've been at many conferences over the years, done occasional consulting projects, but by and large, I've been a technical trainer, if you will, for many, many years. And then here comes this opportunity. Oh, and I was an adjunct professor at RPI in Hartford. That's where I got my master's in CS. And I used to teach like one class every other semester, roughly one a year there. And then I started traveling too much and they wanted everybody on site, so I wasn't able to do that. So once we got toward the pandemic, I was already adjusting my work to be largely online, so I didn't have to travel so much anymore. About 10, 15 years of that was getting old. I wasn't interested in traveling so much anymore. And a friend of mine was teaching at Trinity, and he invited me to come in and just to see the kids and to watch one of his classes. And I wound up then teaching a class. And next thing I knew, I was teaching a class last fall. And then this spring, and one thing led to another, and I got this opportunity. Now, I do have to admit, it's just the right job at the right time. There's definitely luck involved. I had to be in the right place at the right time for that to happen. What I get credit for, if any, is that I've been spending years preparing for that opportunity. And when I saw it, I kind of jumped for it. I did what I could to make connections and to persuade them that I was the right person to do this particular job. So it's like most major career change things that happen to people, it was a combination of luck and skill and working hard and background and privilege and all these different things all mixed together. It didn't have to work out like this. I got lucky that it did. And then I went after it. So what does this mean for jarheads? Well, Venkat, I make lots of jokes about Venkat. And Venkat, of course, is also an adjunct professor at University of Houston, I believe, and teaches 2 classes a semester in addition to doing everything else. I was like joking I was going to do everything. Well, no, that's not going to happen. Something has to give. What's not going to give is the newsletter. I will continue to crank that out every Sunday. I'm really enjoying still writing it. It's somewhat autobiographical, as you could see. It also gives me a chance to experiment with things and tell everybody what I've learned, which is why I like teaching so much. It's one of the things I do. I'm still going to teach my training classes. I really, even though I'm financially in a position where I could just take the academic job, it would be a real cut from what I'm used to. And I don't want to do that entirely. So I'm still going to do especially the work with the O'Reilly Learning Platform. I'm going to try to keep that going at a low level. They were already kind of reducing the number of courses, to spread out the courses over more instructors. But I still hope to do 4 or 5 classes a month. A couple of half days is what it comes down to. I hope to continue the No Fluff Just Stuff virtual workshops at a low level too, depending on how that fits into my schedule, although that's not as high a priority. I'll do that when I can. But what I'm definitely going to have to cut back on is the conferences. Now, I haven't been going to a lot of conferences anyway. Again, it's part of my reduction in travel. But this last month and a half has been very busy. I've been to St. Louis for No Fluff, and then Atlanta for Dev Nexus. And then I went to Bangalore for GIDS, which was a lot of fun. And then did this No Fluff event in Boston this last weekend. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah, that's not going to happen so much in the future. I'll have some travel, but the school gets priority and the semester gets priority. So during the summer, sure, that's fine, but not as much happens during the summer. And otherwise, we'll just have to see. I suspect that's the part that's going to wind up having to give to some degree. Now, am I still going to write books? Well, each book I've written in the last 3 or 4 of them has been, that's it, I'm done. That's my last book. I'm not doing this anymore. And I certainly wasn't going to write this one. But Okay, let me, the Trinity people are happy I'm writing this book. And when I finish this book, then we'll see. I may be done certainly for a while I get my feet under me at Trinity. And I want to get this one done before the fall starts. And I'm about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through a first draft. So making progress there. What I don't enjoy, of course, is the editing, the updating of all of that. I'm also not sure what's going to happen with my YouTube channel. I mean, the YouTube channel started out as what you're getting now, the video version of the newsletter, which I would crank out every Monday. But I was trying to build it into a more interesting channel by adding all these additional videos like on Gradle or Spring or JUnit or what have you. And I'd like to continue doing that, but it's hard. That takes time. Now, on the other hand, I will have access to a student body, including film students or film editors who may want to make some money. It's not a lot of money for editing, but it's a lot of money to them. I mean, they're just students. They probably like that. And I bet I'll run into somebody who'll be interested in that job, and that would make it much easier on me to produce more and more videos. The recommendation is always to outsource that anyway. It's certainly not my expertise. So we'll see how that goes. I hope to keep it going, and we'll see how that happens now. I mean, the goal of the YouTube channel was the video of the newsletter, and it was something I could do into retirement if I was going to retire. Now I'm not only not going to retire, I've taken a new job. So we'll see how that works. The other thing I wanted to mention, a couple other things. First of all, I mentioned in the newsletter that, my wife is skeptical that I'm going to be good at being retired. She's a master at being retired. She's so good at it. She's always busy with things she wants to do, whereas I'm still flooded with all this work. I would have to disengage with a lot of things, and I don't know how good I'm going to be at doing that yet. All right, so be it. I mean, now I've got something to do. Also, it's a lot easier to explain to people what I do now rather than going into all that, what the heck's a technical training class and how does that work and what do you do? Now I can just say, oh, I'm a professor in the computer science department at Trinity. Yeah, the one in Hartford, not the one in Dublin or, on and on and on. And we'll see how that goes. The other thing is one person commenting on this newsletter mentioned the whole Indiana Jones thing of being a professor and active in the world. And well, this is my quasi-Indiana Jones hat. So I really like the hat and thought, okay, let's do that. So I'm wearing that today and you'll let me know what you think. Okay, and I think that's plenty. I'll let you know what happens in the newsletter as it goes on, but I am going to stay engaged in the community and find out, and talk about events that are occurring. I just didn't have a lot to talk about this week in terms of the developments in the field. So let's go to the tweets and toots. One thing that did happen is LangChain4j, one of my, let's just say my favorite framework right now for doing Java with AI. It turned a year old, and they posted a tweet, and there's the image that they posted. The parrot there is basically the LangChain parrot, the Python framework, but of course it's drinking a cup of coffee, and that's the for Java part, and having the little cake with a candle, and it's a pretty good picture actually, with a spoon there, huh? Yeah, okay. So at any rate, that's the picture, and the tweet said, LangChain4j celebrates its first anniversary today, and they made a significant leap forward. And if you look at LangChain4j, the current version is 0.30.0. So I have the same problem with this that I have with Spring AI. It's that they're both good, and they're both going to be excellent frameworks, but we're pre-version 1 on both. So they're both subject to significant change in the future. We don't know how stable they are. And a lot of people don't want to dive into pre-version 1 frameworks. So that's partly why I'm writing my book, is to deal with the actual underlying technologies, including Spring, but without committing to a framework, though I do expect to have a chapter that does discuss the frameworks, not in a lot of detail, but give an idea what they can do that doing by hand would be difficult, what they do well that I'd rather not do by hand. That would make it much more difficult on that. So at any rate, happy birthday, and I intend to continue my playlist on that as we go on. So I really do like it. I did have a talk about LangChain4j at the No Fluff event this weekend, and all my exercises worked, and I got to talk about how it works. The AI services part, which I think is great, and the tool support, I've got videos on those, went over really well. I did show a rag example. I can't do their simple rag one because I've got a conflict, but the more complicated rag one works just fine. So the only big issue I have, as I mentioned here, is that the word lang chain for J ends in a lowercase j, and I still find that rather odd. Shouldn't it be a capital J? But I haven't worked up the nerve to say anything about it on the Discord server. So, oh well. Here was another picture from the great International Developer Summit in Bangalore last week, or a couple weeks ago. Here I'm sitting with Venkat, my friend there, and Mary Grigleski, I guess is how it's pronounced. She's the one who took the picture. She also had a talk there, and this was part of that was in the speaker room there. So we were in India, and that meant I got to do my terrible gag again. We were having dinner together, a bunch of us in the hotel where all the speakers were staying, and they brought over the bread, and I was able to give them that awful line. You know, the restaurant here is very secretive about their bread recipe. In order to get this, in order to order this, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Yeah. You may recall I got a chance to use that gag in St. Louis as well for the No Fluff event. I mentioned it in the newsletter that followed that. And here I got to use it twice inside of a month. And, you know, sweet. Said that's the groans from around the room were just the icing on the cake. Oh, wait, the garlic on the naan, the butter on the naan, whatever you want to call it. So let's move on. There have been some events in the chess world. I haven't spent a lot of time in the newsletter talking about them lately, but I've been a big fan of chess as a spectator sport for quite some time. And it turns out that Ding versus Gukesh, the World Championship match, will be scheduled for late November through mid-December. I don't know where yet. I don't think they know where yet. But it reminded me to tell you this, that when I did my keynote at GIDS on the second day, I start off by showing pictures of Vidit, who was in the candidates tournament, and then Pragnananda and his sister Vaishali was the first brother-sister team that were both in candidates matches. Interestingly enough, Vaishali had a wild tournament. She lost like the first 4 games and then won 5 in a row. I mean, amazing, really dramatic. But they'll both be fixtures in the candidates tournaments for years to come. They're both very, very young. But the amazing thing is that 17-year-old Gukesh won the whole tournament. Unbelievable. I mean, everybody figured this was at least one cycle too early for him. But here he came out and won it, and we'll see how he does against the world champion. I mean, I expect Ding Liren will probably win that, but I don't know. Ding hasn't had a lot of good results lately, and Gukesh is remarkable. And he's got a young kid's memory and energy and everything, and we'll see how that goes. But when I did that and showed those pictures before the keynote, I started off with, I told my wife I was going to show you these pictures, and she said, isn't that just a cheap way to get applause? And I said, you don't know the GIDS audience. They're far too, and I know this is going to sound familiar, intelligent, sophisticated, and, let's be frank, attractive to fall for such obvious pandering, right? And of course, that got some applause, as it had to, But the talk went well, so it was okay. I don't even know if anybody remembers I did that. It was fun. My son told me about something going on that, their whole world's superimposed upon each other. And if you don't know about a different world, you miss things. Well, my son informed me yesterday, or Saturday actually, that the social media was being consumed by an epic rap beef, if you will, between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. From what I gather from the responses and the reactions on social media, that in fact Kendrick's winning this by a pretty good margin. I did put in a link here that's a whole link of Google results. Yeah, look, this is the New York Times. May the New York Times, Kendrick Lamar versus Drake beef goes nuclear, what to know and all that. Rolling Stone. Here's a bunch of other links to different online magazines, ones. I read the Defector one. Ooh, I don't think I read that. That may be a new article at the Defector. But, I mean, what do I know about these guys? I mean, nobody should ever take my advice on music ever anyway. Well, maybe that's too strong, but I certainly am not up on my rap beefs, or diss tracks or things like that. And it really has been vicious, apparently, and I thought I'd mention it. So what I did see in my feed, though, is somebody retweeted this, was a quote by Ice-T, who I have heard of, said, "I'm sorry if I'm not interested in current rap beef or random male gossip." Wow, that's a harsh comment. "I'm a hustler. I'm only focused on the bag," and he's got a money bag there. I'm like, okay, pretty clear where his priorities are. Anyway, let's move on. Another thing that hit pop culture this week was this idea of bear versus man. And it was a woman was asked on TikTok, or she published a TikTok saying, and I don't watch TikTok, so I heard about this, saying, would it be better if you were in the woods and encountered a bear or encountered a guy? And she picked the bear because it was at least predictable what the bear would do, and you could avoid the bear and all these things, whereas guys, you never know. And of course, a lot of the guys who replied got all sensitive and offended and justified everything she'd said. But I thought this retelling of the distracted boyfriend meme was very good, with the guy looking at the girl looking at the bear, Anyway, I thought that was clever. This one, lessons from Barbie. It said, "Barbie didn't give me a poor body image. Barbie taught me you can't reattach a head once it's been removed from the body." Okay, I know various Addams Family members who might want to have a conversation about that, and not to mention Frankenstein and everything. The Munsters, I suppose, be more into that. Anyway, let's move on. And then I throw in this one, Schrodinger's Dilemma. It's got a stormtrooper from Star Wars firing at a red shirt from Star Trek, and this, of course, came out on May 4th. May the 4th be with you meme and everything. And the thing is, this one's not much of a dilemma. The stormtrooper would miss and the red shirt would die anyway. I mean, what else would happen? Driving home from the Boston area on Friday, I saw the MassDOT has signs they put over the highway on May the 4th. And here's a few samples I found in a magazine or newspaper there. Kessel in 12 parsecs is too fast, drive safely. And I'm like, parsec's a unit of length. And the response is always, "Shut up, kid, or you'll find yourself floating home," right? Okay. Only a Sith litters, keep mass clean. Yes, well. Trust the Force and wear your seatbelt. Okay. And there were a few others as well. So clever. I've lost a lot of my enthusiasm for all that stuff since Jar Jar came out, and then it suddenly became a kid's thing. And then, of course, Jar Jar Abrams, the disaster of the sequels that he directed, really ruined it all for me again, especially the last one. The last one was so bad that, yeah, I can't really enjoy any of that stuff anymore. It's a kid's show. I get it. Now it's a kid's show. I mean, out of 9 movies, there were maybe 2.5 that were good out of that. And I'm willing to defend that position. So let's move on. I thought this was great. Apparently from DeGiorgi's piano service, it says, "The piano has been tuned. Press any key to continue." Of course, the only obvious response would have to be, really, which one is the any key, right? But there you go. This comment about ants, it had the 2 dogs there, and if you could see, the little bubbles are saying, "Just like me, they long to be close to you," or "Rainy days and Mondays always get me down," or "We've only just begun." And he says, "Crap, we got carpenter ants." Carpenters, yes. Boy, is that a dated gag. I mean, I got it. I wonder if anybody under the age of 35 maybe would have any idea who that is. I put in, which one is Karen? The thin one. Too soon? That's really poor taste. I mean, Karen Carpenter passed away due to complications from anorexia, so I shouldn't have put that in, and I feel really bad, but I did it anyway. Okay, moving on. Brian Slutton, who's also a no-fluff speaker, put up this great tweet. He said, "A thing I learned about Belphegor's prime," Belphegor, I suppose, Belphegor's prime. It's a 1 followed by 13 zeros, followed by 666, the so-called number of the beast, followed by 13 more zeros and another 1. Said it is both a prime and a palindrome, and is named after one of the 7 princes of hell, yeah, obviously, who was tasked with helping people make ingenious discoveries and inventions. And I did put a link to the Wikipedia page if you like, and you can see it has a symbol which is an upside down pie. It's not a big page here, not a lot of stuff, but they do have links to where the name came from and various other features, which was kind of cool. There's no way I could draw that, but if I could, it probably belongs inside an inverted pentagram, right? And finally, speaking of portals to the underworld, it says, did you know that computers don't actually generate heat? Inside each CPU is a miniature portal to hell. That's where all the computations come from. The heat just comes from the ambient temperature of hell that emanates from that portal. Now, there's a gag about engineers winding up in hell and then air conditioning it, but yeah, I didn't go with that one. I knew there'd be some gag about those AI tools basically being demons, but demons spawned from hell and everything, but I couldn't come up with a good version of it, so I just referenced that. If anybody puts a comment in there, I'll let you know. So that was the newsletter for this week. I did do the Reactive Spring course, which was fun, and I had the big event in No Fluff in Wakefield, Mass. This week, I don't have any training classes. I do have the final exam in my Trinity class, but we don't have a final because we're going to do our team project reports that week. Each team has roughly 30 minutes to make their team presentation and everything. And there's 4 teams that'll use up most of the time. I didn't want to have a final after that, so we're just going to go without it. See, that's how you become a popular professor, right? So I hope you enjoyed all that. I'm glad to see everybody, and I will see you all again next week. But let's first play that theme song.
Hey there, it's time to tune in to Tales from the Jar, so let's begin. Java, Kotlin, and Spring, oh my. Groovy, Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the Jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech toast that never ends.